Hello and welcome to the Mac Gamecast episode 44. I'm John Carr and here with the awesome Sam. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Fantastic. And today is going to be all about Baldurs Gate 3, and some more Baldurs Gate 3, unsurprisingly. I guess I kind of lied. There's a very quick side note, which is Feral Interactive is not dead. After 1.5 years, they released a new Mac game, which is Total War Pharaoh, I believe. Just today. So, if you like Total War and or you like Egyptian battles and stuff, you can go check that out. It's on Steam. I don't know if it's on the App Store. It could be. You can buy it direct from Feral, which is a Steam code, but you support Feral more. It's a $60 game. Honestly, I don't think it's worth $60, but I'm a little biased. I think it's more like a $40, $50 game. What do you think?
People love Total War games. I'm not one of those people, so I won't be buying it. But I own, I think, like 4 of them. I have no idea why, but that's just kind of the Steam thing.
Yeah.
I keep buying into the hype, buying the new one, and I don't dislike them. It's just
they're not like your jam. Yeah.
I prefer RTS, like Age of Empires 2, which is technically a Mac game, although not really anymore. I bought that game for Mac when it was OS 9.
Wow,
I think.
Nice.
Today. And I still play like the classic edition. You can run it really easily on your Mac through crossover and stuff. Or
sure, yeah.
It's a late 90s or early 2000s. I forget what it is, but easy enough to run on basically.
Cool. Yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there because our next episode could be a month off and it was news today. And I like to monitor Feral, so I just wanted to mention it really quick. But otherwise, today is a Baldur's Gate 3 review with Sam and I, because we're the only team members who have actually played it. Sam has played more than me, but I've played enough, certainly, to discuss it. I think I'm around 40 hours in. But it's not 40 hours in. It's 40 hours spread across multiple playthroughs, so I only got so far in each one. You got further than me. Yeah, besides just the review itself, because, Baldur's Gate 3 is interesting. It's come up on the podcast before more than once. We mentioned it even years ago when it was in early access because it was on Mac. We mentioned it recently when it was, coming out or it has come out. Casper and I had a fun episode on the quality of the game versus, because it spawned this internet debate. But here we're mostly here to talk about, the game itself. But I also wanted to consider talking about some adjacent things like, just the sheer magnitude of the game. I do think it is a crowning achievement in game history, honestly. And maybe some things about D&D itself, like kind of how accessible the game might be if you're not familiar at all with like D&D rules versus maybe you're just used to Divinity games or whatever RPGs and you're hopping into this. Some stuff like that. Some things around the game also, not just the game itself.
Yeah, and I was curious, John, what's your like CRPG or like D&D like background going into a game like Baldur's Gate?
That's a great question, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring it up. No real D&D background. I mean, I played Neverwinter Nights. Oh my god, I don't know when, and I never got that far. I was unfamiliar. It was all strange to me. I'm like, oh, this is a cool fantasy RPG thing. I got it. Honestly, I think I pirated it. Sorry, Macsoft, whoever the heck published it way back then. I don't know who it was. I was overseas at the time, though. I went. Anyway, that's an aside. I don't know. I got to level 5 or something, and I had no idea what was really happening. I just kind of stumbled my way through the game as some type of ranger. And then I never finished it. I did a little co-op. CRPGs, I mean, most of my time has been spent in Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2. I never played the old Baldur's Gate games beyond like demoing them, or Icewind Dale. There's various games I bought and or tried, like the updated Planescape Torment game. That was, I think, a Kickstarter, I don't know, 5-10 years ago. There's been a couple others I got sent as like review codes. I can't remember their names now. By all accounts, they were pretty solid games, but sort of their density and, unfamiliarity with the world. Like when a game is that big, I have to be really hyped to play it because they tend to be long games, 40, 60, 80, 100 hours or whatever it could be. They tend to have dense rule sets with around combat and character building. So most of my RPG experience was action RPGs, which are very straightforward. They tend to not be complex unless you're Path of Exile, and the complex part is the stupid skill tree with 1,000 nodes or whatever. The game itself isn't complex. Like, click on monster, click one of your 5 spells or attacks, and monster dies, and rinse repeat. Diablo type formula. So
Yep.
Yeah, when I first tried Baldur's Gate 3 in early access, actually 3 odd years ago, one of the reasons I returned it was because of its density. I'm like, I just don't understand how this game works, and that annoys me. And I was only trying it for under 2 hours. I planned to return it. I'd always planned to buy it later because of my background with Larian. Well, not with Larian, but with Larian's games, Divinity 1 and 2. I loved them so much. I mean, my YouTube channel was built off Divinity 1 tutorials. I spent so much time on that game and really deep dived it, like A to Z, figured everything out. And that was super fun. But by the time Baldur's Gate 3 came around, I didn't quite have the same drive. I was playing a lot of RTS games, shooters, so background wasn't really there. And it did put me off, I'm not going to lie. Even though I'm like, I'm Mr. Pro Gamer, I'm pretty good. And I kind of hit a wall in my face, like, oh my goodness, the spell slot thing really threw me off. Like, wait, what? I used the spell once and suddenly have to rest to use it again? Like, I'm just used to slinging spells on cooldown, from so many other games. So, like, stuff like that really threw me off. And not like, oh, I hate this game. Just like, I have to, like, actually learn this game or I can't enjoy it.
Yeah, I have, like, a kind of similar, probably even, like, less exposure to the genre. I've, in regards to D&D, I've played like not a campaign, like I've done like a one shot once, right, and I enjoyed it, but my friend group, it just doesn't have. We have one friend who can DM, but he doesn't have a ton of time, so he's not super interested in putting a campaign together, which is very fair to him. He's a busy guy, he's got kids and stuff. And the rest of us would not be a good DMs, so we kind of just don't play D&D. But I have that one shot that we did, really enjoyed it, and I'm talking like obviously like real tabletop D&D here. And that was probably like 3 or 4 years ago. I want to say like sometime during COVID we did that.
Yeah.
And then other than that, CRPGs, I've bought a bunch, as we all do on Steam, but I own Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2, and I booted them up briefly. Was never in the right headspace to really play them at the time, so just, I don't know, played like an hour and then thought, let's go back to probably a shooter or something at the
Yeah.
time. So this is my first CRPG since, I'm betting nobody listening to this will know what this game is, but Atlas Gift of the Arami. I had to look it up. It was made by Freeverse, if you remember those guys them, from the early. Yeah, so that's from like the 90s, that game. It's like a super old school, like top-down CRPG. I probably played it on like an old like iMac G3 or something. Nice. That's the last like CRPG that I actually like completed, and I was like probably 8 or 10 or something at the time. Since then, I haven't really done anything in the genre. So I think all that's important, because a lot of people will approach Baldur's Gate 3 and they'll go like, oh, it has a 95 or whatever it has a Metacritic, but I don't play CRPGs, or I don't play D&D, or like that's a really good game for people who like those games. And this, it's just not. It's so like, obviously you can dislike Baldur's Gate 3, that's totally fine. But I think if you're avoiding it because of those reasons, I would definitely give it a shot. Like me being someone who has never really enjoyed or consumed that genre of games, and has played D&D once in my life for 4 hours, I think it's an incredible game. So if you are someone who loves those things, it'll probably be your favorite game ever, I'm assuming. Maybe not, but I don't want to like overhype it, but it's just super high quality. But if you're not into those things, I think you're really going to enjoy it.
Right, yeah. I had a mental format for this review, and I got scrambled and forgot. You're setting it up nicely, though. Thank you. Like, who is this game for? Was kind of the conversation we just had, or who might it? Is this game for you? And I think that's a really relevant discussion. It is a $60 game. Hasn't been on sale. I mean, will be eventually, I'm sure, but it'll probably take you 50, 100 hours to finish it or whatever, depending on how you play. And that's just a single run, all that kind of a stuff. But I think, even if you're not, because I also like shooters and the strategy games are my bread and butter. I always come back to them. I always enjoy them. I'm deep in Darktide and Cyberpunk right now, like just cranking on those games when I have free time. But Baldur's Gate 3, like it can and will consume you if you get into it, because there's so much to do, but it doesn't, so much to do in the sense of that it doesn't make you feel like it's a chore, like, oh no, I have to just tick these things off the list. No, it's like really interesting things to do. I want to advance the main story. I want to do this fun side quest. I want to, take time to spend time with one of my, party companions and see what they're all about. So yeah, what the main difference for those who don't know, CRPG does stand for computer role-playing game, and they are meant to emulate a more heavier rule set as opposed to action RPGs or ARPGs, which Diablo and all its ilk, Titan Quest and what have you. I mean, I don't really know what good action RPG we've had on the Mac recently. I mean, Diablo 3 was 10 plus years ago. I'm sure we've had smaller ones since then, but like AA, AAA ARPG, I don't know if we've gotten. I guess Path of Exile came out.
Was Torchlight ARPG?
Yes, it was.
That's a while ago now. But...
It's like a AA game, indie sort of AA type. But yeah, Baldur's Gate, like, if you're not sure, don't just go to like the Steam page. Go to YouTube, go look at some cool videos, go look at some how-tos, even if you're not sure. Like, the game's worth a peek, even if you don't necessarily like fantasy. The game is fantasy, but it's weirdly grounded because the writing and characters are so relatable, for the most part anyway. I think you can always find someone somewhere that will interest you, or a certain quest line, or there's a lot of cool stuff in the game. So now that we might have, we've more or less established who the game might be for, a quick, like, maybe you can, because you've also played more than me, but kind of a quick breakdown of how, like, what does the game look like to play, for 10 minutes or whatever.
Yeah, and I won't get into spoilers yet, at least, but I guess maybe before I get into that, do we want to set ground rules of, like, what we're going to talk about in regards to, like, how far into the story? Or
yeah, we'll do spoiler stuff towards the end. You have played more than me, so I'm limited, but I have played a decent chunk of Act 1, also like multiple ways, and seen a bunch of different paths. So there's a lot of cool stuff, and I have some inkling of what starts to happen in Act 2 just because I consume so much media and social media around the game, and Reddit and YouTube and whatever. I inadvertently, like, mildly spoiled a few things for myself. Nothing like serious, but like it won't be a total surprise going. Act 3 is a total surprise other than the setting. And a couple, well, anyway, there's still a few incidental things I spoiled as well. But at the end of it, I don't know. Like, review, we can talk performance, we can talk gameplay, visuals, feel, length, the value, like kind of all the standard beats you might hit in a review. And what we think of it, and then we can have stop here unless you want to listen to spoilers, and then we'll wrap up the show. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. So trying to think back. I'm about 80 hours in now, just to get the audience like up to speed of my setting
right
for Baldur's Gate 3. 80-ish hours, probably like 20 of that is save scumming. I've only done one character.
Oh, really? Okay.
I'm planning to do it with make it a co-op campaign fired up with some friends soon, but I've really wanted to start new characters and like restart Act 1, but I was like, no, I'm just gonna like complete the game once and then probably do Act 1 a million times.
I think that's the best way to approach it, honestly. I wish I had done that, but I'm kind of stuck in this weird multi-arc limbo of Act 1.
Yeah. So I'm playing a ranger, which I found out later after I made my character that probably not the best character for like a new person like me. Like it's fine. Like it's not like I'm.
So you made a custom character, not a preset?
Yeah, a custom character. My custom Tav. I'm like this like old grizzled guy with like long white hair, like massive white beard, like
Nice.
kind of like a Geralt of Rivia look, but a little more old and grizzled.
Nice.
I was going for like old Aragorn sort of vibes or look. But yeah, so like what is it? I'm trying to think back. So like I start the game up. This isn't spoilers, it's the first 10 minutes. You're on the Mind Flayer ship. And what I think I would definitely say to those playing the game is like I think that Mind Flayer ship does a good job of like introducing you to the game's mechanics. But if you get on there and you're like, this is a lot, like there's like brains running around and like a lot of gore and like what are these Mind Flayer things? I would say like get off the ship. You can get off the ship in like 5 minutes if you sort of understand the flow of events there. You'll go down to Act 1 onto the beach and to like the Sword Coast, I think it's called. And then so that you're only like an hour or two into the game at this point. If it's your first time playing, if it's your second time playing, you're like 10 minutes into the game. Definitely get that far and play a little bit before you draw conclusions.
Right, yeah, agreed.
Yeah, so it's just... When I started playing it, I was like, okay, this is like a standard CRPG. Like, here I am clicking around, I got my couple spells, got a companion now, turn-based. I should mention I played a lot of Dragon Age. I forgot about that. So that'd be a much more recent CRPG. I played Dragon Age Origins, the first one. And that people would probably know is made by BioWare. But BioWare actually made Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. And then they went on to make Dragon Age, which they call the spiritual successor to Baldur's Gate.
Right, yes.
So obviously it's a totally different IP, different world, different characters, different everything. But if you played Dragon Age 1 especially and liked it, that game was meant to be a successor to the first two Baldur's Gates in a sort of similar vein to how Baldur's Gate 3 is obviously a true successor.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, but the more I played, the more just like eyebrow raising in terms of like a good thing, like just the sheer quality of like just character interactions, random little, like you'll see like a little like a stone on like a crane, and you're like, oh, I wonder if I can shoot that crane with my bow and arrow. Yep, yes you can. And then the stone will fall and maybe damage somebody or break through the wall or whatever. Depends on the environment you're in.
Right.
But yeah, the game does a good job of like not ramming tooltips down your throat. I can't stand it when games do that, when it's just like tooltip after tooltip and like the gameplay stops. You gotta like hit X to close the tooltip window, and then it does a good job just like slowly introducing you, and it makes you like figure things out in a good way, where if you dial the difficulty down and you just like, say like I'm just gonna like left click the guy with my sword, you can play the game that way, but it's not going to be very fun. If you put the difficulty up, I think the game gets a lot better because it forces you to reevaluate how you approach certain fights. And I think the fights are not just literal fights, but like sort of the sequences and like set pieces that they've designed are really, really good. Like I think that's one of the best things I've enjoyed about Acts 1 and 2, and I'm just starting Act 3, so probably Act 3 as well, is every single fight, whether it's like a boss fight or just like a couple random, I don't know, goblins or something, they all feel very intentional, very well thought up by Larry and the dev, and there's no like trash mobs, so to speak, where it's just like fighting for the sake of fighting so you can level up. You gotta grind like 200 kills over here and then we're gonna be level 4. It's like none of that. Every encounter you have is a meaningful fight, and you can approach it different ways, and it's once you win the fight, you've won the fight. Like the area is not gonna like reset or respawn or anything like that.
I do appreciate that a lot about the game, especially even playing a game like Cyberpunk, which I adore. There's a lot of the game's filled with trash mobs, as it were, which are just random gang members sitting around. And I stop all the time from my vehicle or whatever. I'm like, oh, I'll just go over there, shoot them all really quick, and then keep doing what I'm doing, loot them, and keep on my way. So, or obviously you're used to that from ARPG games where it's nothing but trash and bosses. It's like the whole game loop. So I really do appreciate that about Baldur's Gate 3. Like you said, everything feels intentional and more organic. Like people are doing things that make sense. They're in a village, or they're a camp, or they're out fighting a owl bear, or they're like doing stuff in the world, and you happen to encounter them. And often you can talk to them first, not always, but often, in many cases, which is nice. So yeah, starting the game, I agree. You should do the tutorial, which is the ship. You should get on the beach. Character creation can be daunting. If you're not sure, just pick one of the cool preset characters. They're all neat. If you don't pick them, they show up as companions later. But you can also be one of them, which is neat. Because you can change stuff later. You can change your class, but not your race or background. And some things are kind of hard coded for the whole game, so it's not like pure experimentation. Or you should go look up like Baldur's Gate 3, how to build a character or something. That would be my advice. But otherwise, like most of these games, it's real time in the world as you walk around and talk to people and what have you, or explore. But then when you're in combat, everything's turn based. Another thing that's really cool about combat is that it's turn based, but this is there where the D&D rule density comes in. Most of it is around, like 90% of it's around combat. The other 10% is kind of the world and checks during conversation, persuasion, intimidation, and so on. So everything is controlled by initiative, which is usually derived from a particular stat, which I forget what it is. It's not finesse or some shit. Maybe that's a divinity stat. Of course, there's also mods, which I've messed around. I think I have a true initiative mod on, which rolls for initiative literally for everyone every time. So I kind of forgotten. But what I love, even though it's all turn-based, if you're in the same initiative block as your teammates, you can all act in real time within that same turn, which is really interesting. So it actually creates a really dynamic feeling combat, rather than probably there'll be someone who's always taking their turn truly alone. But I found even playing in a random 4-player party, well, not random, it was with friends, but we didn't plan like, we'll plan our initiative values or something. But 2 or 3 of us were always acting at the same time, so we could set up really cool turns. You can we'll all move here, then I'll use one, action here, then I'll use my bonus here to buff you, and then I'll take mine. You can create these really fun turn combos by acting in the same initiative range, which I found to be incredibly cool.
Yeah. And the turn-based combat is, obviously I've experienced it before in games, my first time experiencing it, but that was probably that and the game's length were probably the 2 biggest, I don't know, before I bought it. And it's the turn-based combat is a lot of, I think for people who don't play the game that watch it on Twitch or YouTube or something, they'll be like, why isn't this real time? The turn-based combat allows for an extremely deep combat system. I don't mean deep in the sense of there's this monster skill tree where I'm I don't know, level 86 dual wielding. No, it's deep in the sense of the things that you can do and just think about, and then combo with the environment or with companions or with enemies. Things that you wouldn't think the game will let you do, but in real life, so to speak, you could do. You can probably do. So that might be I don't know, convincing somebody that they shouldn't actually be fighting you right now, or using the environment to your advantage in a way that basically zero games let you do. So yeah, don't sleep on the turn-based combat if you're skeptical about that.
Right, yeah.
There was one fight in particular, I won't say what the fight was, but it was a pretty difficult fight that I accidentally stumbled into. I knew it was coming, but I wanted to put it off longer, but I it ended up needing to happen before I went to sleep. Went for a long rest. So it's all right, I guess I got to do this. And I sat down at 7 or 8 o'clock at night that evening and lost a lot of times. But every time okay, what if I positioned here and used these spells, and then I have this one-time use spell, I'll say. You know what I'm talking about, the brothers or whatever they call.
Yeah.
And then like also the thing in the flask.
I was going to say,
I'm
did he
intentionally
have
being
the thing
vague
in the
right now.
flask?
Yeah. So like I had both of those.
Ooh.
So I was like, oh, like, is this the time? Like, do I use them? So then like you use them and then maybe you wipe again. And then, so long story short, I spent like 4 or 5 hours on this one fight, but it didn't. And some people might hear that and be like, oh, that sounds horrible. But I could have easily just dropped the difficulty and like wiped the mobs. I could have probably installed a mod to like make it easier if I wanted to. Or I could have just done a long rest and avoided the fight. And that would have been fine for like the game. Like wouldn't have like broken the game or anything, but it just wouldn't have. I didn't want the story to play out in that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just a really rewarding and like fun challenge, just like sitting down and like maximizing this combat, and really using like everything the game has to offer to your advantage. And you're like combing through all your characters' inventories, like, all right, what do we got here? Like, what's this, a little buff, or maybe somebody's hiding like a fireball spell or something that I didn't know that was on my third companion, or I don't know. Yeah. I really, really enjoy the combat. And the thing I enjoy about it is like, you might hear 5 hours. That's a ton of time. 99% of the fights are not like that, especially if you're over leveled. It's pretty easy.
Yeah.
But the fights are also few and far between and very well crafted. So it's not like it's like you're going into these like tedious turn-based combat scenes like every 10 steps because they're spawning trash mobs on you. It's like, there's the fights. You probably see them there before you engage in them. And you decide how you want it to play out.
Yeah, pretty much every single fight is either a set piece, a quest, or like some sort of intentional encounter you might stumble across, like you said. So what's also rewarding about them is, well, they feel meaningful. So whether they're hard, a hard fought battle is, of course, like, woohoo, we pulled that off, even though we're all like down to 1 HP and that guy's dead over there. We got to resurrect him. Or even if you just sweep through and, demolish the characters, well, then there's like a story beat there. There might be someone you rescue. There could be someone's dead who spawns a quest. It could be, you can even, there's a raise dead spell, ritual spell, so you can run around and talk to corpses. Although they won't talk to you if you kill them, but then you can use the like change appearance spell to alter your appearance, and then you can talk to them. And there's like all this like crazy stuff around the game. But most of the game is actually exploring and like talking to people, whether it's your companions, going on quests. A lot of the quests, frankly, do involve combat, or they involve, well, persuasion and intimidation. Maybe you got to go like bully some goblins off, and like, because you're a barbarian with intimidation or something, you can go scare them off. Or like you said earlier, alluded to earlier, you can convince some people to not fight you altogether. You can convince some people just to join you. You could join them. You can backstab people. Like, the game really is very deep in its quest and story systems, which all feed into these really cool combat moments. And they always feel meaningful because you're always doing something. And there's definitely a ton of optional content. Actually, the optional content's kind of mind-blowing. Like, you can skip the Underdark. To me, that's insane. There's so much to do in the Underdark, and that's not really a spoiler. Like, it's shown in the trailers and stuff. I'm currently in the Underdark, pretty deep in, haha. But I'm like, you can just skip all this. This is insane. This could be a whole game down in here. Like, the length of time you could spend in there. And of course, my introduction was quite memorable because I got jumped by 2 Minotaurs. But that's exclusive to how I got in. There's like 4 different ways to get in, and you go in another way and it wouldn't happen. So it reminds me a little bit of like the old Deus Ex games. Not obviously in its look. It's, those were first person games. But just that, here's a thing and you can resolve it like 3 or 4 different ways. And honestly, this game even exceeds that. But it gave me that kind of feel, like you said, like, you can kind of do it in real life. And so many games have like gamey systems, and there are gamey systems here, but most of it's more around magic. Everything else is like take a basic action. Everyone has access to these basic actions, which are, and honestly, so fun. Everyone can like jump, push, or shove. I forget what it's called. And a couple other things like throw objects. So suddenly you can do all these like outrageous things in combat, or even outside of combat sometimes, just with these basic actions. Jumping around the fights, where up and down ledges actually becomes very important. You can shove people off to their doom, or you could be shoved. I actually got killed in a pretty major fight against a boss in a camp, because I didn't realize it was the first time it happened to me. And I was thinking of shoving people off, but I got close, and I was a paladin with quite high strength, like 18 strength, and like 20 is kind of the max you can get. Not quite, but kind of. So I was like, well, and I failed my strength save, and I got shoved, just insta-killed off into the pit of doom. And I'm like, what? Help! My friends resurrected me later. This was in the group play, so the AI, even on this was just on normal. It wasn't even tactician, where they're even smarter. So you can just with these basic moves, you can set up all sorts of ridiculous combos. You can shove people onto like ice or oil or effects or off ledges. And
my favorite interaction is when you have like a I want to say hobbit, halfling in your party, and then you have like your barbarian or your paladin, or so you're a high strength character. And maybe your halfling has like some sort of close quarter thing, or maybe they have a bomb equipped or something. Your barbarian can like throw them into a mob of enemies, even though you're like allied with each other, and then just get these crazy combos going and stuff.
Throwing.
But if you try to throw it like your barbarian into combat, that's not going to work because your barbarian weighs like 300 pounds. So good luck with
actually
that.
Throwing stuff's one of my favorite things in the game, especially with Karlach's Bay. We'll get to companions, but she's the preset barbarian. And you can take extra. So I want to take a moment to talk about this. Review's a little haphazard, but okay, it's a big game. We didn't even mention the story really beyond mind flayers, I guess. But the max level in this game is level 12. Honestly, that when I first saw that also threw me off. Like, level 12, I'm used to hitting 20, 30, 50, 100. Like, what do you mean level 12? That's nothing, pshaw. But in D&D terms, the max level is 20, and level 12 is actually really strong. Like, you're basically a demigod almost at level 12, or a superhuman at a minimum. And level 20 is like god tier. You're like fighting Thanos in the cosmos. Like, you're like a celestial being. So they actually capped it intentionally at 12 to not get too insane within the D&D rule set. So you hit probably level 3 or 4 fairly quickly in a couple hours, and then leveling does slow down. But leveling each level in the game feels so meaningful for each character class. You get tons of cool new unlocks each time. You can often select new spells or feats, features, abilities, extra little things for your class or even your subclass. Maybe it's racial specific. You just get a lot of fun new toys drip fed to you. It's definitely not the pace you might be used to from other games, but honestly, as someone who tends to play a lot of these fast paced, like, give me the loot, give me the levels, Borderlands, Diablo, whatever, I thought like, oh, I might hate this. I didn't even notice because the game is so gripping and immersive. Like, you just get absorbed in the world and systems. And they give you, and you're finding new fun stuff all the time, like new loot and, new combos. And some characters can switch out their spells, like clerics, and I think wizards can just prepare their spells, for example. Can just swap them out on the daily.
And the one thing I really appreciate about, like, this isn't unique to Baldur's Gate, but more single player games in general, is if you feel like you're in an interesting area where something should be, like, maybe you don't know there's anything there, but just like, this seems like there's something going on in this area. There's probably something going on in that area in Baldur's Gate. So it's just, the game rewards you in that way. Like, you could just speed run it and like do the main quest line and not explore the map, but and in a lot of games, single player games that I've played in the past, it's like, all right, spacebar through like dialogue, like on to the next mission or next whatever, and I don't really care, let's just get to it. In this game, Act 1 specifically, I think I've finished, I forget how long it took me to do like the main story beats in Act 1, but I intentionally explored everywhere because I was just having such a good time. And I was like, I'm sure Act 2 is going to be great, and I've since finished Act 2, and Act 2 was great, but it's like, I don't want to progress. Like, I'm going to go to like this obscure corner of the map that is still dark for me, and see what's going on over there. And I remember out in, I'll keep it very vague, people will play the game while I'm talking about, out in like the beach. I'm trying to think how much I should say now. I'll save it for later.
But I agree, there's a lot of cool stuff to find. Now, the main quest does a good job of presenting you really interesting parts of the map. Like, it's not much of a spoiler. You'll come across a group of people and, in a camp. I'll just say that much. And, they're under attack, but then there's like discord within the camp. And this isn't really a spoiler. It's just like you find it out immediately. But then once again, there's so many different ways to resolve that. You can help one side, help the other, help everyone, betray them. You can just do all kinds of fun stuff. And even in the camp, then there's like little kids trying to steal your shit, and then you can be nice to them or not. And then you can even like steal their shit, and the game accounts for it. Like, hey, who stole our stuff? Like, the game pays attention to so many little details that other games just don't account for. And by I don't mean pay attention to, like, they went and recorded dialogue for all this. Everything in the game is voice acted. It's outrageous. You can take a speak to animals ritual spell or whatever and go and talk to all the animals. Now, Divinity 1 and 2 did that, to be fair, with the animal friend or something perk. But there's just so much outrageous detail in the world in terms of its depth of... Now, not every single character is going to have some epic story attached to them. They might just be a cow that says moo, or a vendor who's like, hello, here's my stuff. But you can often find all sorts of random quests too by also just poking your nose around, or funny interactions, so that's, just, you can just get, if you love exploration, this game's for you, because you can just get lost in the world. And honestly, if you like a good story, I mean, who doesn't like a good story? But if you like a good fantasy story, this game is definitely for you. So the main setup, again, not a spoiler, you're captured by mind flayers. I don't know who mind flayers are in the lore, other than they're like real bad guys. And they can capture you and put this like little tadpole in your head, and it turns you into one of them. So you like your characters, whoever that is, have these tadpoles in your head, but for some reason you're not turned right away. And this is the big mystery. Like, why haven't we turned into a mind flayer in a matter of hours? It's been days and we're still fine. Like, this is weird. So you're on a quest to like find a doctor or a healer or a whoever, a magician, like someone who might know something. That's like the main thrust of the quest, like the initial part of the game. But then you can even draw upon your tadpole powers later. That's not a spoiler. But you don't have to. It's optional. There's tons of stuff in the game that's optional, which is really interesting. So it's very much a play your way, whether that's more in like persuasion and intimidation, or even like performance and acrobatics. You can't be a pacifist. You do have to do combat in the game, but you certainly can do less combat in some cases. Or you can play, total Mr. Paladin, Justice Goody Two Shoes. You can be a pretty darn evil scumbag, honestly, especially if you play Dark Urge, which I am, and you're like basically a super violent psychopath, and you get special options to indulge in your nastiness, and you're rewarded for it, which is even like weirder. But you can also resist it. There's a whole storyline there. You can also try and resist it. So it's like, it's not a life sim game the way like Disco Elysium is, though I forgot I was mentioning CRPGs. Technically, Disco Elysium is one. Meaning released on Mac recently. But so it's not a sim game the way, like, again, there's Deus Ex, Thief, Disco Elysium are. But the world is so rich and so dense and so varied, it almost is like, it's like approaching a sim game, but it doesn't play like one, I guess.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good explanation. Like, I would say there's obviously the main story and your companion stories, which would be like the secondary level quests, and there's like sort of third level quests for other people as well. And if you go into this game, let's say you played a ton of D&D, you can obviously do whatever you want. If you have that mindset, you're not going to have a good time, because like it's a game. Like, obviously you can't do literally everything. You can't make the random shop vendor join your party and he's going to be this heroic adventure or something. But if you're willing to accept that, like, these are the rough boundaries in which this story is going to unfold, I don't mean like choices you make. I just mean like very general, like, what we need to get this tadpole out of our head. How you go about that is pretty much entirely up to you. And that's like the real joy of it. And same with your companions. Like, you can kind of be as intimate as you want, shall we say, or as cold to them as you want, and they will reward you, or I'm trying to think the opposite reward, but like negative consequences. Like how you treat your companions matters in terms of like the quest they offer you, and then the story, and like
Yeah, the
buffs and
companions are
all that
worth
stuff.
noting. I mean, BioWare's known for their companions. This isn't a BioWare game; it's a Larian game. But if you played the old BioWare games, whether that's the Neverwinter Nights, Knights of the Old Republic, Baldur's Gate, what was it, Jade Empire? I think
Mass
even
Effect.
maybe Mass Effect, obviously. Um, but I think Larian's done an incredible job and written a lot
Yeah.
of really interesting characters. Or you'll either love them or you'll love to hate them, depending. And there's some in between, surely as well. Like I hate Gale, I don't deal with him, but tons of people love Gale. He's quite popular. So the game is a really interesting cast, and you meet one of them always right away, which is Shadowheart, unless you're playing her, I guess, as the pre-con. So she's always your first introduction. So, she's very, like, everyone knows Shadowheart, basically. The rest of the characters, some of them, I'm trying to think. Some characters, even sort of main companions, it's theoretically possible to miss them in Act 1. Like,
Hmm.
Karlak, for example, is kind of out of the way. I think there's no reason to go over there other than your own exploration.
Yeah, Karlak. I saw like videos and knew she was in the game, and I wanted her as a companion, but I had to like look it up. I was like, where the hell do I find Karlak? Like I was like, is she in like Act
Right,
2?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
and I would have found her eventually, I think, but it's the map just keeps going like in a good way. Like you'll have this like you clear this whole area. It's like, wow, that was like incredible. Like we got to be on to Act 2 now, and then like, oh, never mind. Here's the Underdark
Yeah.
or whatever. Or if you don't take the Underdark and go the other way, like I did both ways. I kind of like maximized Act
Right.
1. I like went all the way through one path, and then I was like, do you want to go to Act 2? I was like, nope, and then it went back, and then it went the other way.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, like I'm really, really enjoying just exploring every nook and cranny. And if you're someone who explores a lot, but not quite everything, and then you did a second playthrough and you made different choices, you would have a very, very different game experience.
Yeah, I have heard some people recommend that, like especially on Reddit, like, depending on the kind of player you are, obviously, and the amount of time you have. I'm more I like to do everything once, the first run as much as possible, and then a second run, like as many different choices as possible, but also like trim down on the extra stuff that's kind of fluff. Though the game doesn't really have fluff, it's all really high quality fluff, like really high quality. There's no real fluff in the game. I'm using that word like as an optional content, basically. Yeah, but some people have recommended that way, like just pick one path and not the other. But yeah, the companions are really fun. You'll stumble across several of them early, like not scripted, but kind of like the quest line essentially puts them directly in your path, and you have the option to recruit them. Sometimes, like it's a confrontation. Honestly, some of them you could, if you make certain choices, you'll just kill them on the spot, and that's it. They're out of the game. Boop, a major character gone. You know. Or obviously you can recruit them into the party, get to know them as a friend. I think pretty much every character is romanceable who's in your party without limitation. I'm not the biggest fan of that, not because I don't believe in inclusivity or something, but I prefer it when games are more like, well, this character has these preferences, these four are like this, those four are like that, or whatever. But that's, a minor nitpick on my end. Ultimately, everyone's really interesting. Some characters are more evil inherently. Like they're happy to do evil things. You actually get like goodie points with them when you do kind of like nasty stuff. Other people are very righteous. Some people are much more in between. Some people you can even convince them of certain things. You can even change like their mind or personality, like in major ways. Like it's really rich, like the whole like companion side quest system, in a way that's far greater than anything like Mass Effect. I guess I can't speak for the old Baldur's Gates. I didn't play them, but the BioWare games I have played, it's like way richer and deeper, honestly, than any other like RPG I've played. It's really satisfying.
Yeah, same. It takes things like I remember in Mass Effect 2 or 3 where you're talking to Liara or Garrus or whatever, and those games were really, really awesome for their time. But this game feels like that, but in the modern setting. Like in 2023, I'm now like in my 30s. Like I'm having that same feeling talking to my companions as I had when I was like, I don't know, 14 or whatever, like Mass Effect for the first time. So I mean that like the highest praise possible. Like it's so much deeper than Mass Effect, but it's just like the next generation of like companion based storylines and stuff.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons it's so. I mean, the game's impressive on a lot of levels. Like just talk visually. Now, it's not a FPS or something which tends to push your computer to its melting point, at least a PC. But it's a very good looking game. It's a very good looking game. And what goes into visuals? Well, it's not just the graphics. It's also like art design, which is really well good. It's like quote unquote level design or map design, also really good, really varied, really rich, really interesting. Everywhere you go, it's like, ooh, you're just looking everywhere, all sorts of cool stuff. Indoors, outdoors, underground, overground, whatever. Audio is fantastic. Music, voice acting is like 10 out of 10. Not just because everything's voice acted, but the quality of it is really good. The variety of it is really good. You don't notice like, hey, that's the same actor voicing these like 5 dudes or whatever, which happens in some other games. Animations, really, really good for combat, out of combat, spells, facial animations. Like characters are very emotive and expressive, whether they're happy, sad, angry, confused, interested, attracted to you or whatever. It's just really, really well done. So a ton goes into the visual and audio presentation of the game. And also the design of the game itself. And then you combo that with the really interesting exploration, the combat system, and then, of course, even out of combat, it's really fun to talk to people, choose different options. Honestly, a lot of those are like really significant, what you choose in conversation. There's frequent options to persuade, intimidate, or charm, or all kinds of stuff like that. You can use your racial stuff or class stuff all the time, some more than others. Like if you're a bard, there's kind of choices everywhere. But sometimes you can only do stuff like a barbarian can do or a paladin can do, because it's your thing. Barbarians get like super rage strength things where you can just basically rip things open or apart. Like it's like, oh, unlock this thing. You failed. Well, then an option pops up like barbarian rage, and you just like rah, and rip a door open or something. You can't do that on every door, but it like pops up here and there. Or you're a paladin. You could come across somebody arguing, and you can go up and there's a paladin option that says, "Well, I'm a paladin who upholds justice. Let me hear both your stories, and I'll make a judgment." So there's a lot of options for role play as well. Whether you're a magic user, a fighter, a good person, a bad person, whatever. The game has a lot of classes, subclasses, races, blah blah blah. So just the whole package is what I said earlier. I think this is a crowning achievement in game design. Like even if you don't like the kind of game, the sheer magnitude of the game, the quality that was put in to its audio, its visual, its animation, its gameplay depth, combat out of combat. Like I've played so many games where I'm like, well, this game's not bad, but I really only like kind of this part of it, and I focus on that. This game, like across the board, is just so fun and so engaging. It's like, well, I want to do everything all the time. Oh, a combat? Great. I'm happy to have some combat. Oh, more exploration? Awesome. Oh, more talking? Cool. A new town or camp? Great. Now I can buy, sell, trade, steal, explore, get quests, level up. Not in town. You don't level up in town, but over time, things just naturally happen in this really fun, honestly, organic way. So I just think it has to be said, the game's incredible just for what it is, even if you don't like it. But if you like this kind of game or dip your toes in, maybe like we have, we're a little like hesitant. We're like, not really sure, based on our backgrounds. And then we tried it and we're just like whoosh, sucked in, down the rabbit hole basically. And since I've gone on to like look up more D&D rules, not that I have to, have just been interested, watch more like D&D sessions, look up certain things, and just kind of have a blast and the surrounding, like adjacent. And I think the community is great too, whether it's on social media, Discords, Reddits. I don't know if that's true of all D&D communities or anything, but Larian fans are pretty cool. Fans of this game, I think, are really cool. People have just tons of funny stories and interactions. And, oh my God, I didn't know that would happen. That's more spoiler territory. But it's just a really fun game to play. And I want to say it's a fun game to be a part of if you're into like interacting with its community and the things around it. There's a bazillion mods already if you're into modding the game over on Nexus Mods. Honestly, I don't know if they work on Mac, but they do on PC quite easily. It's just a darn fun time.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. So we've talked about like gameplay, obviously, and like the depth, the story. I think we'll have to save maybe for the spoiler section a little bit. Is there anything else?
I mean, I guess
non-spoiler?
performance. I mean, on Mac. So I did just install the game on my MacBook Pro and play around a little bit. So it defaults, to whatever the max res is of the Pro. I forget what that is offhand. My M1 Pro, anyway.
It's like 3,000 by 18.
And ultra settings. And a couple cutscenes, it was chunking down to like 20 FPS. But like just the game itself, like sort of standard, it was running at 30 FPS, 28 to 30. This was, imagine, max res ultra settings. So clearly just turning them down a little to like medium high.
And was this your cross save from PC that came over fine?
That didn't seem to work, but I might have turned it off. Because I turned it off. Because for some reason on the PC side. So I did just start a new game and run around a little bit. And it all seemed good. So I can imagine quite easily if I just turned a few settings down, I could easily get steady 30. Honestly, if I went down to medium, I could probably get 60 steady. Like the performance seems pretty good. And the game, like, I know this is speaking for myself. I have a stigma about graphic settings. Like I refuse to play on medium. Of course, I used to have to play shit on low, but way back in the day. But honestly, this game looks really good, even on like low, medium, or medium high. It's a great looking game.
Yeah, it's also a game where frame rate, like I think you want to keep it above 30, or like 30-ish. But it's a top down turn based RPG. Like if your Mac's running it at like 25 frames per second, that's
fine. I agree. I agree.
It's not like it's a shooter where you got to do some crazy flick shot to headshot the guy behind you.
Yeah. No, you definitely don't need a high frame rate, like maximum pinpoint accuracy or anything. You can totally take your time. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually intentionally limiting my frame rate to 40 on my pretty beefy PC, just so my fans calm down and my room stays a lot cooler. My GPU is not exhausting 90 Celsius air.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I've been doing that. So performance is good. There was a delay in the Mac version, but it's out now. So you're all set there. I bought it again. So, so talking about co-op really quick, because obviously this is a great single player game. The companions along the way make it almost as if you're playing with other people, to some extent anyway. But I think I actually normally just like these kinds of games at 4-player. Like I play Divinity 1 and 2, both solo and maximum 2-player. Even ARPGs, I prefer Borderlands with 2 players, Diablo with 2 players. I don't like the chaos of having 4. It's kind of too much, everyone running around doing stuff all the time. So, games like this, you can play up to 4-player co-op. I think there's even mods that unlock more or something, but whatever. 4 is the normal official supported. It's actually really fun because you can split up. People can run around and have their own conversations. It's very easy to just click and listen in. You don't even have to be nearby. You just get this little ear icon, and you get a history if you want of like what's been said and chosen already. I think you can even vote on options if I'm not mistaken. If you're all in the same conversation together, there's like a little like vote party system, I think, in co-op if you want. Of course, the party leader can just do what, the person who started the conversation can always do whatever they want, but they can, if they want, take the voted suggestions. I already mentioned earlier how combat's really fun to combo and do stuff together with, but even outside of combat and exploring, it's pretty easy to, there's like teleport gates to get around, although they're fairly far apart. Honestly, you won't really want to, you don't want to run around and fight alone. The game is balanced for 4 players. And even like a single level difference matters. Like if you're level 4 fighting some level 5, it's like, oh shit. It's not like other games where it's like, pshaw, 1 level difference, who cares? Like levels really matter in this game. Even a 1 level difference is like, oof, you can get like your butt kicked. Typically you'll stay together, but like say you're in a town or whatever, usually you'll split up and sort of then come back together, or oh hey, I found this cool thing, then everyone runs over, and or oh shit, I got caught and now I'm in jail, which happened more than once. I got put into a prison and tortured actually in a different, not in a town, but in another camp, shall we say. And it was something no one else had seen in the game yet, even though they had been playing it a bunch. They're like, what? I didn't know that could happen. That's so cool. And I'm like, come and save me. Help. So I think the multiplayer experience is also really strong, whether it's 1 player or even just 2 players, 3 players, 4 players. I think it's a great time. In traditional D&D fashion, my multiplayer games fell apart after a few sessions and then never reconvened. The D&D curse. But
Yeah.
it's a good time multiplayer is what I'm saying also.
Yeah. I haven't played multiplayer yet, but I've heard from a few people, if you care about the story, which I think you should to play the game, just have your own save, like single player with your companions, power through at your own speed, and then have your multiplayer on the side. Like do whatever you want, obviously, but I wouldn't. Unless you have a really committed group, it's going to be really hard to experience the story in the way and the speed that you want to experience it.
It's true. It's
personally.
True. You're not
wrong. So, and the point of multiplayer is not necessarily like deep story. It's like having fun.
Yeah, the shenanigans together. But I agree. You definitely miss stuff because people are running around just and not even saying and just clicking through a conversation.
Yeah. Or your friend yelling in Discord during a particularly meaningful scene or something.
We definitely had one clown guy in the group. The other two players were like pretty serious, and this guy was just total clown mode, which is a little irritating. I mean, we all like him. He's a fun guy. Dang you, Kyle. You know, but he's definitely like kind of clown mode a lot of the time, which can ruin.
That's what the deafen button.
He was like our goofy warlock. He's always pretty much every 10 seconds someone was saying, "God damn it, Kyle," because he like runs around and like triggers a fight or gets arrested or whatever. Anyway, no, it's the shenanigans that you play the multiplayer for. The story, like unless you don't care, but you'll miss a lot in multiplayer for sure, unless you all take completely. Then it takes too darn long, you know. So can't recommend that. But it's a good time. I was having fun as just a paladin, frontliner type. So I kind of wanted to go back to combat a little bit and some of the expectations around that as well, because even on normal, unless you're like some D&D veteran, even then the game isn't 1-to-1 equivalent. What's called 5e rules. There are some changes, so some things are easier and some things I think are harder. I don't know all the there's a list, people have compiled lists. Some things are adjusted in favor of the players and some things are adjusted in favor of the AI, because you said after all it's a game in the end and it's not the tabletop where like the players and DMs are just running everything. And of course you can house rule literally anything on the spot, so the game has to work with its rule sets. So even if you're very familiar with 5e, there are like changes to certain things, so you should probably look those up. But the game is reasonably difficult on normal until you figure the game out, and even then it can remain challenging. But it's more about even like strong characters don't have that many hit points. Like you can get beat up, and having even I don't know. I think I don't know what the highest amount of hit points you can start with. It's maybe 15 or something, 18 around there. It's not a lot per se. And it's reasonably common for someone gets downed in a fight and then you have to go and res them, but you also roll death saves, and if you fail them, you die. But everyone has a resurrect scroll, to start with, and you can buy more. Or I think certain classes, higher level have spells that just resurrect people, like clerics or paladins, probably clerics but even then, what kind of cleric are you? Are a cleric of the light or of the storm, and blah, blah, blah. So on it goes. But certain kind of expectations in combat, it may not immediately click. We touched on this before, but kind of a little more in detail. If you're used to playing different games, Destiny, Diablo, whatever, even other CRPGs, which don't use the D&D rule set and use their own, having 50 hit points is a lot, 100 hit points is a lot. You're not going to run into people with thousands in this game. Although I think there is someone with 666. That is a reference. And that's oh my God, that's a lot of hit points. How are we going to get through that? So the game is both if you just kind of take it at face value, it might seem slow or hard or whatever. But maybe I could just shove this really hard guy off a cliff to his death. Haha. Now I don't have to fight him. You can do stuff like that. Oh, wait, well, maybe I could debuff him and then make him slip or stunned or, make him fail a wisdom save because then I shot him with a debuff arrow. Then my mage cast a spell on him. If you just get a couple combos going, suddenly all this stuff really clicks. So we talked about this before, but I just wanted to mention a couple of the expectations, because again, coming from kind of the gaming background I do, I was a little curious, or even thinking back to games like Fallout 1 and 2, which were also on Mac way back in the day. And I think those were CRPGs, or at least adjacent to them.
Yeah, they are.
And those games could be hard, but also you could just like walk up and one shot someone with like a shotgun or minigun or whatever and just chunk them everywhere. So it's not that you don't feel powerful in this game. You will, but you probably won't feel really powerful to like level 4 or 5. Probably maybe level 5 is where things start going, oh my god, you get like level tier 3 spells, which turn you from like fairly strong magic user to like screen clearing genius, in some cases. Or your fighters suddenly gain like extra attacks and all this extra cool stuff. Because like, oh, my fighter goes from 1 attack to 2. How impactful can that be? It's actually like insanely impactful in this game. In the rule set of this game, it's like, oh my god, that's bonkers. So everyone gets 1 main action and 1 bonus action by default. There are rules that adjust that. Certain classes can get extra bonus actions or free actions. Certain melee fighter classes can get extra actions later in the game, main actions. But that's the default setup. Everyone has access to his basic actions like jump and shove and whatever, and then things are influenced by your stats. So you go to shove someone and it's your strength, I think, versus their athletics or something, but that's influenced by strength. So if you're like a puny mage with like 8 or 10 strength going to shove someone with like 18 strength, it's not impossible, but you have like a 5% chance of succeeding. I don't know the math, I'm just putting that out there. You're very unlikely to succeed. So it's ultimately a game of statistics and dice rolls, and you have to be okay with the rolls not going in your favor unless you're just a permanent save scummer, which you can do. But I think the game's, at least outside of big, like absolute vital moments, I think it's more fun to just go with the dice, because that is kind of the whole part of the D&D experience. You want to do a thing, a persuade, a check, a fight, a spell, whatever, but the dice don't go in your favor. But you accumulate gear, stats, perks over time, which make it like almost impossible to fail. Or you get maybe reroll modifiers, or what's called advantage. You roll 2, pick the higher one. And but that also frustrated me up front when I tried the early access game. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm used to playing Divinity where you can't miss. But that's not true. You can't miss spells. Melee attacks you could miss if you attacked higher level characters than you. Then your hit chance went down proportionately. From 100 down to 80 or 70 or whatever. But anyone at the same level was just 100. And spells never missed unless you misclicked. So suddenly I cast Lightning Bolt and it goes miss or fumble. I'm like, what? And then wait, I could only use it once. Now I have to long rest to get it back. Like it like kind of exploded my brain. So you just kind of have to adjust your expectations a little and then get into the flow of like the dice system. And then it's actually incredibly fun. And I think it's unlike anything I've ever played, because I haven't gotten to tabletop. I've never played a one shot or any campaign on tabletop, even though I've wanted to. It hasn't happened. I've just played other games that were inspired by D&D, but did all that in the background. So it's a little like in your face, or in certain big moments in the game, like it literally rolls a D20 die on the screen, all over the screen, and shows you the result. So it's like you have to be okay with dice and the randomness therein. Even though obviously you'll get mad, because that's how dice go. They screw you and they shower you with goodness in criticals and stuff. But there's an average, of course.
They actually have a setting that's enabled to default karmic dice. So if you don't want that, you can just go into settings and turn it off. But so that'll just basically mean you're not going to roll 10 ones in a row. But if you turn it off, you could roll theoretically 10 ones in a row. I turned it off. I thought it was more fun with it off. Yeah. But it's on by default, so it just prevents you from failing epically too many times in a row and getting too frustrated.
So after a little adjustment period, I actually really got into it. And then you get excited, like, here we go. I did my setup. I buffed. I did everything I could. Roll, And you get to a point when you level where it becomes pretty hard to fail, because your stats are so boosted. You have like 90, like almost 100% chance to do it. And of course, if you're doing a low level combat or test, you just completely blow it out of the water. You need like a 10 or 15 and you can get like a 25 to 30 roll and you just destroy it, So yeah.
I still enjoy it when it's like, because if you roll a 1, you get your critical failure and your buffs don't matter. You just fail. So like I'll have Asterion. He's a rogue, for those who don't know. This isn't really spoiler at all.
No.
He's good at lockpicking.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a
No,
spoiler. Rogues are good at lockpicking. Spoiler alert. So we'll be like at some trap he's disarming or some like easy door, and I'll be like, oh yeah, Asterian's got it. And then it'll like critical 1 failure ignites a trap. Whole bunch of stuff starts blowing up, but also there's ads there. And it's like, oh, fuck, Asterion. Like,
Yeah, that's the point of the dice, is they're supposed to tell a story. So the game has a really good narrator who isn't the DM, but it's this great narrator, this lady, I forget the name of the voice actress, but she's really good at narrating like events and choices. And so not every failure gets narrated. Sometimes it does, though. On a tabletop, a good DM will do that, narrate your failure or whatever. But that's part of the game. Is it's this epic journey of highs, lows, middles, epic rivalries and romances and adventure, or sometimes it's just small town, some little petty thing you can deal with. The game has a real scope to it and a real just flow to it that's just really fun to get into, and the dice are part of that. So basically, you have to get on board with the dice, or the game will not work for you. But I say, if you're hesitant, like I was, and I was very hesitant, just give it a go. Push past the ship, get on the beach, like Sam said, play a little, explore a little, like get to the first big town or camp, which doesn't take that long. In the game's like, you get a cool set piece fight, although there's kind of one on the ship, arguably, sort of, but more a little ways into the beach. And this and that, and then like all these different quests. The game suddenly can kind of send you in many different directions. It gives you a main like quest line on top of your, your tadpole thing, and then like give like, I think you can play for like that hour 40, like hours, say 50. Like say I want to stay under 2 hours and try this game so I can refund it. I think if you give it a serious try for like an hour 50 minutes, you can definitely get far enough and experience enough to decide, if you like it or not. But if you kind of bounce off it, I say, because I think the game really is worth it, even if you bounce off it up front. I bounced off it up front in the early access. The dice and the systems and the spells and the rules is like, I don't know about this. Though I didn't play long. I didn't even get off the ship. I played 20 minutes or something, 30 minutes at most. But yeah, I think it's worth pushing through. Again, that doesn't matter if I'm just trying to set the expectations about the game's experience.
Yeah. Like, to add some extra flavor to what I started with my sort of context going in, I might have mentioned this in the other podcast episode the other week, but like prior to this game, like I only played competitive FPS, like Valorant, CSGO, or CS2 now. And then like my like non-competitive games was like Call of Duty, Doom, and then like prior to that, like I haven't played it for a couple of years now, or about a year. Like League of Legends, StarCraft 2, like competitive multiplayer.
Nice.
Like I've always been a very like competitive multiplayer. Like I need my like intense mental like duel with this other human opponent for like, and I haven't played or completed. I've played single player games recently. Recently, I mean the last 5-10 years. But I haven't completed a single player game in like forever. The last one I can remember completing was probably Titanfall 2, whenever year that came out.
2016, I think.
So there you go, 2016. And the reason I completed it is because we had no internet for like a week. So I couldn't play multiplayer. So like, take like competitive Valorant person like myself. I don't think I have enough time to play Baldur's Gate 3. I see it's like a huge game. I'm like, that game's not for me. All my friends started playing it the first week in August when it came out. They're like, this game's amazing. I was like, all right, I'll buy it. Probably going to regret it. It's going to be the classic, like, pay full price on Steam and then play it for 20 minutes.
Right,
but no, I've been playing it. I'm 80 hours now. Just started Act 3. And yeah, I've told one of my other friends, I think this is the best game I've ever played in my life. Like, not trying to like overhype it when I say that. I just mean it's just the quality and the polish is just that high.
I would have to agree. It's not the favorite game I've ever played, but it might be the best game I've ever played. And I mean that from every angle. The composition of its systems, its rules, its depth, its writing, the audio, the visual, the animations, the voice acting, there's just like everything together. And the output, like the end output of the game is so darn good. It isn't my favorite game of all time. That's probably Deus Ex and Cyberpunk, because I'm more biased to that genre. But I do think it might be the best game, like collectively, cohesively, whatever I'm trying to say. Like,
Yeah.
I think
Just like on paper, if you were to like
I think it is.
make a column or a graph of all of its
I'd
features.
be hard pressed to find one that could beat it. I could find other games like I love that game, but it had this bug and that missing thing and this problem with it. Like, there's no real problems with Baldur's Gate 3 other than it takes 120 gigabytes of your hard drive and it costs $60. Like, if you're okay with that, it's just like it deserves its 9 out of 10s, its 10 out of 10s, and that's why I said I think it's this crowning achievement. It's just an outrageously good game. It's true. You have to like that kind. You have to like RPGs and fantasy and yada yada, and get on board with its systems if you're not familiar. Like I said, and the dice and this and that. But if you can get on board, oh my god, it's one heck of a ride. And I'm only like 2/3 the way through Act 1, and I'm like, this game's insane. I got sidetracked by some other games, but I really can't wait to get back into it. And the story is just every facet of the game is interesting. If it's either interesting or like riveting. It basically fluctuates between interesting and like really exciting. It never really goes below that. It's not boring. It's not dull. It's not uninteresting. There's so many games I've liked. I'm like, well, this section's boring. Like you said, that spacebar skip. Oh, let's get through this section or this tedious thing. Like the game is just so darn good. Like A through Z. That's why I say it might be. Yeah, I think it is the best game I've ever played, even if it's not the favorite game I've ever played. It's just it's incredible.
Yeah, and to kind of like echo what you were saying, John, like I don't even think you have to like fantasy or RPGs necessarily. You just have to not dislike them, if you know what I mean. Like if maybe you don't love fantasy, but you don't dislike fantasy. It's just like you prefer sci-fi, but fantasy is fine or whatever. I still think you're gonna like it. Same with RPGs. Like if you don't typically play RPGs, but they're not like a negative, it's just kind of, I don't know, meh.
Right.
I still think give it a shot. The only way I would say don't buy it is if you like actively dislike those.
Right.
Like fantasy or actively dislike RPG or actively dislike randomness in your game. Like you want everything to be like fully within your control at all times. Then maybe it's not really the game for you.
Agreed. That's kind of the only conditions. But yeah, if you had to pick one, if this was the game to give RPG a try, like a real try, like I said, that like under 2 hour mark of your time, god dang, it has to be this one. I mean, I don't know when we'll see another game like this. This is like a game of a lifetime, honestly. It really is. Like, and it took them like 6 years to make, hundreds of people, obviously tons of money and hours, like a lot of effort went into this game. And it shows. Yeah.
The other thing I think that's maybe important to note before I hop into spoilers is like the RPG moniker or like genre that's applied to it. Obviously that gets applied to like a ton of games. But like this is what the advantage of D&D, like it's most RPGs that I like sort of classically think of, trying to think back, like Dragon Age, obviously Dragon Age does a good job of being an RPG. And by doing a good job, I mean by being like a role playing game where you, a player, are playing a role. You decide like, oh, am I going to be good? Am I going to be evil? Am I going to be good, but I'm a dick in terms of like the conversation choices.
My favorite BioWare role myself.
Yeah. So like Mass Effect had like the Paragon or Renegade and stuff, but like this game is just, it's the first time I feel like I've actually role played in a video game. Like I've played RPGs, many of them, but it's kind of just like I'm not role playing. I'm just playing Commander Shepard or main character protagonist, and I'm just doing what they would probably do. But whereas this game, I'm like creating like a literal role for my custom character, and it's like I think he would be like generally good, but like also like not like, I don't know, like the caricature good guy who's like, oh, whatever you need, like I'll bake you a loaf of bread or give you all my money or so.
No, I agree. It may have just been the technology wasn't there before to create something on this scale. Not even necessarily the technology, but the sheer ambition and like the audacity of Larian to make something like this, and this to put much time and money into it. Of course, they were in early access. They got a ton of early access sales. To their credit, they got like 1 million early access sales fairly quickly. That obviously helped them. Like, oh, great, And they were so 3 years of like dev. They announced the game, early access for another 3 release. So obviously the game had like a very fortuitous like series of events that came together. Maybe they put it out in early access, nobody buys it. Maybe they're like, oh crap, like no one's really into our game. They didn't get funding. Like that could have happened in a different timeline. Unlikely with their reputation and the game's IP, but not impossible. Games flop all the time. Well, maybe not all the time, but they do, even big ones. What I'm saying is it wasn't just like a hand wave success, like guaranteed to happen.
The other thing that I think is just interesting, and it was not overly important, especially now in the hindsight it's not important, but at the time it was, is Larian paid for their D&D license for this game. They were not given, like Wizards of the Coast didn't like approach them and say like, here's 50 mil for a D&D game or something. Yeah. Like Larian wanted to do a D&D game for a long time. They were told no. Like, who are you? You're not doing a D&D game. So they did Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2 as kind of like, I don't want to diminish those games because they are like extremely highly well-reviewed games. But they're almost like a
resume builder.
Yeah, like a resume builder for like that D&D game that Larian was really, really wanting. And Larian has said they're going to go back to Divinity. I think they're going to cap it off with a Divinity Original Sin 3, nice. And then maybe Baldur's Gate 4. That's like decades away at this point. But
yeah.
So yeah, they had the early access. They got sales from that, but at the same time, they're their own private independent studio. They're not like working for like EA or Activision and getting like the dump truck of cash backed up, and it's like, oh, you can need 5 years and 100 mil. Here you go. Like they're self-funding their game. They paid for their D&D license. They did early access to generate some revenue, and they really bet the studio on like if this game flopped, I think Larian would be done.
I agree.
Sure.
They wouldn't obviously it worked out incredibly like record breaking, but like we said, there's an alternate timeline where that doesn't happen and they fold or they lay off half their staff, whatever. I 100% agree. And it's cool that I think that's part of the charm of the game, that something like this was able to happen because they weren't being constrained by a publisher or a timeline. Now, I'm not saying those are always bad things. Some developers like kind of need some oversight or a little reining in, I think. The same with like some movie directors, just entertainment creators. Some of them get a little too, carried away. But Larian they had a really strong vision, from whatever it's Sven Wick or Vic or something is the main guy, but obviously there's so many other people involved. I just know him as kind of the face because he makes all these, update videos and everything. But that's also what I meant earlier when it's fun to be a part of the game. Like Larian itself, they're like goofy, casual, fun influence, but I say goofy, but the game is also like very serious, and that's what's also interesting about Baldur's Gate 3. Yeah, there's plenty of humor in the game, but there's also like really rich, in-depth, like emotional stories, moments, some like shockingly dark and cruel things, but also like super awesome, like upbeat stuff. Like it kind of feels like grounded life, but in fantasy. But it's not like high fantasy in your face, even though I think it technically qualifies as high fantasy. But so it's it's just really cool. It's darn impressive. And I think it is more impressive that it came out of this quote unquote indie studio.
By definition, it's an indie game. Yeah. Like, obviously, not. It's not in terms of how we actually mean that
no,
word.
No. But it's not a Activision, studio. Blizzard, EA, whatever game.
There's no publisher. It's just
exactly. So it's pretty wild. And like you said, they bought their license and all this stuff. So it's a cool story, and it's they deserve their accolades and their success. So
they've been the global. If you go to Steam and go to global top sellers. In the store, you'll see. I'm looking right now. They're number 2, but they're pretty much the number 1 global bestseller every day since they released. And the only time they drop to number 2 is when a new release comes out, and that'll be number 1 for like a day, 2 days, 3 days, and then Baldur's Gate 3 goes back up to number 1. It's like right now, Lords of the Fallen, which hasn't actually released yet technically, but it releases in 2 days. Everybody's pre-ordering it, I guess. That's the top game on Steam. And Baldur's Gate 3 is number 2. And it's beating out games like FIFA 24 and like Cyberpunk and like...
it's good stuff.
It's top selling doesn't... I don't know. Don't put too much stock in top seller. But it's a testament that 2 months later, this single player CRPG is still chart topping on Steam.
That is notable because most of the games that stay up there are all multiplayer. And if you go look at the most played on Steam, I think the top like almost all of the top 10 are multiplayer. It's all the CSGOs or the CS2s and the Dotas and the PUBGs and whatever, all this other stuff. But every now and then, like, a single player game sneaks in there. So it is notable. Yeah.
The most comparable single player game that I can see would be like Elden Ring's in like 10th or something, but it's on sale. It's 34% off.
Stuff sneaks in there, obviously, for its time, The Witcher 3 and Cyberpunk and all this stuff, like, those are CD Projekt Red games, but, they don't stay there forever, but, they had their, like, time in the limelight. It's really cool stuff. The podcast is getting on a little bit, so let's jump into spoiler mode. Within reason. Sam has played more than me, but
we'll limit it to Act 1. Yeah. And how far have you gotten in Act 1? Like, you can say whatever you want, because I've done pretty sure.
Just a quick disclaimer, for anyone listening, if you don't want any spoilers at all, then sign off here. Thanks for listening. See you next time. But if you don't mind, hearing some more, maybe you've already played, or you just don't care about spoilers, listen on and you could hear maybe some permutations of the story and events. So 3, 2, 1, done. Huzzah. Spoiler mode. So how far have I gotten? Let me think. Well, so I went into the mountain pass where the Geth Krish or whatever it's called is. I didn't actually get there. I just know it's there. And I was just poking around. I was just exploring. You meet the group and there's the dragon and blah, blah, blah. And then, you can, it's funny if you just give them the Shadow Heart's like artifact thing, then I did that just for fun to see what would happen. And of course they just try and kill you. So I went over there, and unfortunately for me, it was like, warning, this will advance quests and pass time. Are you sure you want to go in here? And I'm like, sure, whatever. And then, so I did that, but then I didn't go back to the Grove for like 6 hours, and not realizing that completely closed off the Grove and all my quests inside forever. It's permanent. And all the quest lines associated with it are just chopped. So I'm currently like pretty deep in the Underdark. I'm not to the Forge yet, but I'm on my way. So, but that's basically explored everything else in that side of Act 1. Like everything, every nook and cranny of the map that isn't the Underdark.
Have you done the anti-Ethel and
yes,
all
of that, like 100%. That's honestly a really cool area. Like, very impressive, very interesting.
The thing I was trying to allude to earlier, which it's not really a spoiler, but it's over by Auntie Ethel's area, but it's that like random like druidic circle, like way out in the water.
Oh yeah.
And then so you fight a couple like tree monster things, and then when you loot I think there's like a hidden like a notch in a tree or something that you can loot after you kill them. There's like a piece of paper in there, and it's like a letter to one of the druids in the Grove about how she's going to take over and like overthrow all the druids. And it's like, at that point in the game, I'd already saved the Grove.
Interesting.
So they were already all gone, but I was like, I wish I could like,
interesting.
Like go like confront this person about this like letter I just found. And like,
that was my plan. My plan was to try and clear out the goblin camp. So the quest is you go to this grove and it's under attack by goblins, and there's a tiefling who are like, they look like demons. They have horns and stuff, but they're not demons. They're trying to take refuge in this druidic grove, and the druids don't actually want them there. So there's all this tension, and the druid leader's missing. He's gone missing. He's been captured by the goblins. Lol. Even though he's like level 4. Anyway, whatever. Story reasons. He has like plot armor. He can become a companion later, I think, Halsin. And of course, depending on when you do the goblin camp, it's either very hard or very easy. I came back to it later and just like leveled the place because I was actually level 5. But I did it in multiplayer when I was like level 2 or 3, and it was like, oh my god, this is so hard. So that's fun. But yeah, I found that piece of paper randomly. I actually got stuck over there with Shadowheart for some reason. Somehow she wandered over there alone. I don't know why. So she fought all these people. Actually, she got killed by the last guy. I was trying to see if she could solo the fight out of curiosity. and the last like dude took her out and I had to run over with everyone else and save her. But so I also found that piece of paper and I'm like, great. So you have multiple options. You can side with the Grove and just like kick out the refugees. You can be evil and like kill them all, or you can force that to happen by stealing an artifact and making them think it was them and all this. There's all these different ways to do it. Or you can go in. So they're like, well, we want to leave to go to Baldur's Gate, but the road's blocked by all these goblins everywhere. And it's true. There are goblins in all the passes and there's this huge goblin camp. So you can go and wipe out the camp. But then when you go to the camp, it's like, oh, well, first you have to eliminate all these special leaders and on and on and on it goes. But then you can go over there and talk to the leaders. And one of them, who's this super cool drow lady, is like, yo, why don't we team up and go wipe them all out? And you can be like, woohoo, let's do it. But then certain people in your party might be like, whoa, like, forget this. Karlach's one of them. She'll she'll threaten to leave. And if you push it, she'll fight you on the spot, I think. Or maybe she just leaves. I forget which. But characters can permanently leave. She just runs off and disappears or something. Because they don't agree. Because she's a tiefling. And you're, going to attack her, her people. And so I'd planned to do all that. And I did, like I said, I didn't go back to the Grove for like 6 hours. But I didn't realize that at advanced time, I mean, it warned me, but it didn't say what quest. It didn't say like, warning, this quest will be permanently ended. I was just like, yeah, whatever. I saved my game and then on I went. And when I came back later with the letter, thinking, haha, I will confront this person and expose her evil schemes. I was like, oh, the Grove is blocked off. What happened? Then I had to look it up online. And I'm like, oh shit, this is permanent. Then I'm like, maybe I have a save. And I looked at my saves and it's like, oh, that was 6 hours ago. I'm not replaying 6 hours of the game.
I had this kind of similar experience where I don't even know if I knew at the point. Will as a companion, I had like met him in that set piece you see like pretty much right away. But he just like goes back into the Grove and he's just kind of standing there. Like you can go talk to him or something and he wants you. I forget what quest you have to do, but he'll eventually join your party if you talk to him like once or twice. And I kind of knew that, but didn't bother getting in my party. And then I went and wiped out the whole goblin camp and then did a long rest. And then like the tieflings were there in my camp, like celebrating. And then like they all like left the next morning and then Will just like left. And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess.
Oh, you know what? He actually, he wants you to hunt down Karlach with him. That's how I found her. Because he's like, oh, there's this demon and I'm hot on her trail and I gotta catch her. So I'm like, oh, new companion, whatever, sounds cool. I had no idea who she was. I let him join, even though I didn't really want to give up my current party config. I'm like, well, he's a warlock. I don't have any warlock stuff. Yeah. Let's check out what he does. And so that's how I found Karlach. And then I booted him out of the party immediately for her. She was way cooler. Yeah.
It's I think I didn't get that quest line because I was testing out the like not evil but just like being a dick.
Yeah.
Dialogue options, and he like asked me to do something like to probably to start that quest. I was just like, nope, to help yourself, or like, and then he's like,
he is kind of a goody two shoes, which I also wasn't big on. I was doing Dark Urge, so I'd already at that point I'd eaten Gale's hand. I'd like curd stomped mind flayers and goblins and all this other like evil stuff. I ate some goblin's toe. That was pretty fun, though kind of gross. I ended a aspiring minstrel's career overnight.
Oh, I saw that on.
It's not actually that funny. That's a dark joke.
Sad.
Yeah. So yeah, the game's just fun. So I'm honestly tempted to go reload my save and then like do the Grove thing, because it's not just a matter of how you want to deal with the Grove. There's other adjacent quests. For example, the evil paladin drow, Minthara, who I think is actually really cool because she's a vengeance paladin, but she's evil, and vengeance paladins can basically kind of be evil and not break their oath. You can recruit her as a party member, but only if you go wipe out the Grove. And you can even agree to wipe out the Grove and have Karlach leave your party and everything. She goes to the Grove and you go there and she's like, WTF, the Grove's closed. Like, what's wrong with you? And then she'll attack you, which is what happened in my game. I was just curious to see what would happen. I didn't want to give up Karlach. I went back and reloaded. But so there's a bunch of like resolutions to that whole Grove thing, which is sort of, it's the early part of Act 1, kind of the beating heart of it. like, and then you can move on to other things. So then you have the Githyanki. I don't know how to say that exactly. With Lae'zel, who's one of the main companions, unless of course you play her as a precon. You also like scripted meet her on the ship. She like jumps down to attack you, haha, and then you talk to her, and it's all good.
Yep.
She's a major part of the story. What's interesting is some companions are more a part of the story than others, and this was also true in previous Larian games. Say Divinity 1 and 2. Some characters were just simply kind of part of the main story, and others were just kind of tangential. Like they had a fringe quest in Act 3 or 4 and whatever, you know. But other characters are kind of mainline. So Lae'zel is one of the main companion characters, at least in Act 1. And I happen to know Shadowheart is the main one for Act 2.
Yeah. We should have asked this earlier. What's your like default party?
Right, yeah. So my solo, I'm running a, you know, self-created sorcerer or sorceress or whatever it's called. Who do I have? Who's my main right now? I think I just kicked out Astarion for Lae'zel. I was using him for the longest time, but honestly, mostly just because he can lockpick and steal. So as my sorcerer, always Karlak as soon as I found her, because I love her personality and just her skill set is awesome. Her damage output is bonkers if you take certain things, which I did. She can hit people for like 40 damage in one swing. But she misses a lot, so whatever. My sorceress, Lae'zel, who the heck else am I using?
Shadowheart?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, of course, Shadowheart, because cleric. You know, I don't want to play a cleric, but I want to have one in my party. Very useful. So yeah, Shadowheart, sorcerer, Karlak, and I was using Astarion. Then I just switched him out, I think, for Lae'zel. I honestly wanted Minthara, but I can't have Minthara and Karlak. Apparently, there's like really janky, weird ways you can do that. Like, I saw this on Reddit.
I think you have to like kill them and like I think you have to kill Karlak in camp or something?
You have to kill Karlak and someone else will leave too. Maybe Will or like the more like good aligned types.
And then like recruit Minthara, then go back to camp and like it seems pretty janky.
It's very janky. And I think at one point you have to turn Minthara into a sheep or something. I don't know. There's all this stuff. You can kind of like trick the game, but it might cause bugs later. I don't know. And in the game, funny enough, even accounts for that. I didn't get there, but again, like I said, I accidentally spoiled myself. So there's a party at the end of Act 1, or is it the Grove? There's like this party. Where's this party at?
It's not actually too far. You probably just haven't seen it yet because you accidentally closed the Grove.
Yeah.
If you like save the Grove, by like, AKA kill the Goblin camp. Right. They're like, oh, like thank you for saving us. We're gonna be like on our way now because it's clear, and like they have like a party.
Right. Okay. So apparently, if you kill them, like your companions, and resurrect them at the party, they'll ask, "Oh, hey, what happened with the Grove? Like we missed that." Like even the little stuff like that they added in. It's so good.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I still have to do that in another playthrough.
Yeah, mine's been pretty consistent. Shadowheart and Lae'zel the whole time. Extremely rare that I would ever sub them out. And then it's mostly been Karlak as my third, but it's been, I would say, like Karlak 70% of the time, a little bit of Astarion, a little bit of Will. I don't really like Will, so I mostly just was like, oh, Warlock, let's try this out. But what's weird with my party is I feel like with me being a ranger, I wish I wasn't a ranger. A ranger is fine, but it's just with the companions that I want to have.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird party makeup.
Right, yeah.
Because like ranger is basically like a fighter / archer.
You're like a ranged marshal, what they call marshals in the game, who are typically melee, but then you're ranged. Yeah.
So I have like, I have very good archery skill set, and then I'm fine with like swords and I have medium arm proficiency. But so my party is like me doing that stuff, Lae'zel, fighter, and then Karlak, who I kind of treat Lae'zel and Karlak the same, both just like in their face, like go do a ton of damage. My Lae'zel is like untouchable. I've won so many fights. Her armor class is like 20.
Oh my god, yeah, that's bonkers.
And she has like gloves of snaring on, so she can like catch arrows.
Oh, those are fun, yeah.
I think I got the Misty Step boots on her, so she can just like, teleport around the fight. But I tried subbing her out, but her storyline's really cool. Like initially, I thought it's like this angry orc.
Well, she's very
But-
she's a real, let's just call it. She's a real bitch up front. She's rude.
Yeah.
She's arrogant. She's condescending. She's cruel. Like, I haven't gotten further, but again, I've accidentally spoiled a few things, and apparently she has more of a transformation. But what I love about her and Shadowheart is they're always bickering. So having them in your party is just a riot. Like as you walk around the world, and then but not even always bickering. Sometimes they just have, because Lae'zel has never been to your world before. She's basically like, think the Spartans, but they're like cosmic space travelers. That's kind of what the Githyanki are. They're hardcore, like mega warriors, and
they're like the sworn foes of the mind flayers.
The mind flayers. So that's why she's part of the story. And of course, she's telling you, just look, let's get to our camp crush thing, which is further on in the act. And then like, it'll just take care of it. Like I know it, like my elder there or whatever, will take care of us. So I haven't gotten there, but, her learning about the world and like other races and people and like simple things, names, like instead of tieflings, she says teethlings, like teeth as in like your mouth instead of tieflings. Then she's like tish pasha, like she's always offended by stuff when she gets corrected or, and things go over her head because she doesn't understand like aphorisms and analogies. And she's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I won't really spoil much because I think that's probably more Act 2, 3, but like her storyline's really good. Hers and Shadowhearts are the ones that I've heard that.
I've heard that. Which makes sense.
So I'm trying to think. How far have you gotten in the Underdark?
Let me see. I'm almost to the forge. I'm on my way to the forge, and I already know I can craft some like uber armor there or something if I get the iron, but I was just.
Have you went on the boat across the little?
I tried, but I got ambushed. Like I couldn't. I failed a persuade, like a deception check, and then I didn't have like the boots from the goblin, the halfling runaways or something as proof that I did the guy's bidding. So they attacked me, and they just slaughtered me. They all went first.
Like the other ship that's like coming the other way. Yeah,
I had to reload and go back instead of trying to fight again because I just got annihilated. I went around and did more stuff in that area. I went over to the weird like tree mushroom people. Then I went.
Did you complete the request?
I faked it because at that point I had switched over to a bard instead of a sorcerer just for the lulz. And I convinced them with some very high level deception that I'd done everything they wanted. But it's a bard thing specifically. Like that's an option.
Oh, that's cool. I had no idea you could do that.
You can,
like,
resonate with their melody, but then because you have performance and at a high performance stat, you can like, because they check your mind for images, but you just create the images of you doing everything they wanted and killing all the bad evil drow dwarves or whatever. And then they're like, cool, here's all our stuff in our treasury and off you go. And I'm like, I didn't do it that yet,
Yeah. Did you do the tower down there?
The tower.
It's like in the same area, like what do they call it? It's there's those like robotic turrets defending it.
Oh, well, there was like a moonlight camp sort of thing, like a mini puzzle almost. I kind of forget.
I forget the name though, but it's very close. Like it's in the same area. You don't have to go across the ship or anything. If you walk into the area with the tower, there's just this like automated magic.
I remember there were two of them on side of the stairs, and there was like a locked gate, and it like zapped you. Yep. It was that. Is that what you mean, or a different one?
Well, there's that big tower that they're defending, and I don't know if you've been in there yet. So if you haven't,
so I think I'm near it because I've just been doing different things. What else?
I couldn't figure out how to actually. Well, there's a way to deal with the turrets. That's right. I had to look up online, but that tower has. I'll just say explore the tower. Sorry, I don't want to say much more. But.
I did stumble across the beholder down there, who was like a real oh shit moment because they get a.
Oh yeah, that was my first experience in Underdark. I went down the that's the Shar whatever fortress. Right?
Yeah.
And then you like the one window's like knocked out, so let's jump out here. And then
correct.
You see the drow that are frozen.
Yeah.
I tried to like kill them because I figured they somehow get resurrected or something. Couldn't figure out how to kill them, so I just kept walking, and then
you get ambushed. Yeah. At that point, I had already opened my flask long ago, so I'd seen one already. Oh, spoiler alert. The flask.
We're in spoilers.
I had gone through. I got in the because there's multiple ways to get in the Underdark, including apparently very early on if you have Featherfall. But I got there later through the like thieves camp thing, and they had an elevator.
Mm-hmm.
If you have the flask, apparently you can give it to them and like unlock trading with them and high level items. But I had it, but it was empty, so I gave it to them, and they're like, rah, they got enraged and all attacked me, and that was a fun fight because of all the like high level bridges and stuff. Shove came into play there, great. You just push people off. But yeah, I went down the elevator, and then 2 Minotaurs promptly jacked me and kept just like trampling me all over the place back and forth. That was a fun fight. Nearly did me in actually, because I was stuck in like a corner with nowhere to go, and they just kept like charge ramming me. I was like, oh my god, make it stop.
Yeah.
But there's more than one way to get to the Underdark. You can get through the Goblin camp. You can jump off, I think, 2 different cliffs, maybe, if you have Featherfall or something. Anyway, permutations. So where you land could also, like, you could land right in combat. You could just come in more normally and kind of poke around. Yeah, so that's where I left off, and I haven't played since. But otherwise, I've explored everything overland, tiny bit into, like, I think they call it the Mountain Pass, and then I don't know, maybe halfway or something done the Underdark. And finishing that's as far as I've gotten, but very impressed by the game's just permutations around the Grove, certain quest lines, things being cut off or opened up.
Yeah, I kept thinking Act 1 was like, I was like finished Act 1, and then it's like, oh, never mind, here's the Underdark, or here's the Mountain Pass.
Yeah, or even like the whole hag thing, in the swamp, which again, all this illusion spells, and that can end multiple different ways as well, whether saving the girl and her like in the wand to resurrect her husband or not, or letting the hag live. Oh, so what did you do with the hag? Like, how did you resolve that?
I killed her, and I gave the wand or the staff, whatever it is, to the wife, and she was really upset with me because I ruined her plan to resurrect her husband. So, and then I gave her the wand. And I was like, oh, whatever. And then I think it's all in the same area. Maybe it's later on. She like resurrects her husband, and he's like a zombie. And then they just kind of like wandered off.
Nice.
Apparently, you see them later in like Act 3 or something. Cool. But I'm not
so
sure.
Unfortunately for me, I had freed her from the cage. Like the hag sets it on fire, so I cast a water spell on it. But somewhere in the fight, she died, and I didn't notice.
That's too bad.
So I tried to go and resurrect the husband myself with the wand, but it doesn't let you. And I did kill the hag, although I saved then and tried not killing her to get to a permanent stat boost, which is actually pretty tempting. But what's funny, earlier you can try to get the hag to help you with the tadpole, and she like gouges out one of your eyeballs with her hand, and you're actually permanently like scarred in one eye if you do that, and it gives you +1 to intimidation checks. Like forever,
Did you get to Volo, or whatever his name is? The bard guy?
Oh my god, yeah. He's great.
Did you let him do his magic on you?
Yes, that is also rough.
Yeah, I wussied out, and like he was like going nuts on my face, and then I was like, and I keep going like twice, right. And I was like, no, like I didn't know what was going to happen. I found out later, like on the internet, that I think you get a permanent stat boost.
I don't remember.
I think you get some sort of permanent stat boost if you let him just like keep going.
Yeah.
He gives you some robotic eye or something that gives you like perception, or
I think I may have failed a roll. I think I passed a few, and I think it makes you roll for it, and I think I failed because my sorceress was a wuss, like super high charisma, because sorcerers are charisma based for their spells, and I think constitution, but I forget what I needed, strength or dex. I needed something, and I failed it.
Well, I was worried about getting like a permanent like debuff because this guy's going nuts on my face here.
Well, that can also happen apparently too in some cases, so you got to watch out. Like,
yeah. What'd you do with Asterion the first time he tries to munch you?
Let me see. I first told him no, and he slunk off like such a sad puppy. I felt so bad. I reloaded and like let him bite me, because he was like Man, the narrator makes you feel bad too. So I was like, man, I felt so guilt tripped. I reloaded. I mean, it was so obvious he's a vampire. It wasn't some. I don't know why they tried to make that some reveal. Like, of course he's a vampire. It's obvious just by looking at him the first 2 seconds. Even though he's immune to sunlight, it's like he's obviously a vampire. Even his bite marks on his neck, very visibly. It's like, ooh, he's a vampire. It's like, well, yeah, I know. Everyone knows. I didn't let him bite me later. Like, I'm not trying to be. He's fairly friendly with me because I'm Dark Urge, and he's like, Yahoo! Like, do your Dark Urge things. And honestly, the voice actor's like pretty primo. Like,
oh yeah, he's really. That's why I don't usually have him in my party, but I wish I had him more just for his voice actor. Like, I think they're all good, but he's just another level. Yeah, there's this one where I don't remember where this is in the game. Probably in the Bard area, like the Grove. Or sorry, not Bard area, Druid area.
Right.
I just saw like a random, like on YouTube, somebody is like a perception check on like a.
Oops, I'm sorry. I accidentally clicked mute on you. You have to unmute yourself. My mistake. Sorry, repeat.
I'm back.
Thank you.
I had this random video where it's like I think a statue of a bear or something. I'm pretty sure it's in the Druidic area, maybe in the Owlbear Cave or something. And it's either an animal handling check or an Arcana check.
Right.
And so like they get Asterion to like do it, and it's just like immediately like failed, and then he's just like rawr. Like, he has no clue what the statue is. But yeah, he's awesome, Asterion.
I mostly like him.
He hates me though.
I like him for his voice acting mostly.
Yeah, he loves the bad choices, and I keep not making the bad choices. So his like happiness with me is like a little bit below center.
Right.
He doesn't like, it's not full, but it's Lizelle and Shadowheart. I have like maxed on both of them, and it's funny now because like you were saying they're like bickering, and this isn't really a spoiler. I guess obviously you can max out their happiness, but they're like still bickering, but they're like friends now. So they're kind of like sibling bickering instead of like, I'm going to kill you.
Right,
bickering.
yeah. Because, spoiler alert, they do actually try and kill each other at one point, and that can play out many different ways, so also very interesting.
Yeah, when that happened, I just succeeded the checks first try, so I didn't really have to like think about it.
Right.
To save both of them, but yeah, now I didn't think about that until now, but yeah, that could go...
It can go very sideways, I found out. Yeah. And I thought it was like one of those things where it's just like, oh, this is tension. And I'm like, oh my God, someone just got their throat like ripped out with a dagger. Okay, holy shit. Like, reload. Try again, So yeah, the game is just, it's so good. And this is just all Act 1 stuff, and I want to play more. I've just been sidetracked by other games.
I kept thinking Act 1 was going to end, especially when I cleared out the Grove and the Goblin Camp. I was like, okay, like Act 1 is complete. And then,
in any other game, it would be. That would be Act 1 or whatever, or even half the game. And it's just like, oh, wait.
And then I went and did like Anti-Ethel, cleared out that. I was like, you're like, okay, now it's done. And then like, yeah, then there's just like that was like 20, 25 hours maybe. And I didn't leave Act 1 until about 40 or 50 hours.
I think that's a lot of people. And again, what's great about this is the game rewards you mostly through either a really fun or interesting story or tidbit or cool set piece combat, but most often in the form of like you get really cool items for your characters, whether in a chest or a dead body or dug up from the earth, or obviously from some like boss type character, quest reward. Yeah. And it's not always useful for your character, but it's pretty much always useful for someone in your party, And items are pretty significant in the game, like for the most part. They're not just like plus 0.1% strength buff or whatever nonsense. It's like meaningful, cool stick.
I thought it was funny, like in hindsight, like Halson, when he's telling you like how to get to the whatever the Act 2 place is called, the place you're like trying to get, that's on all your journal quest markers. He's like, oh, like there's the Mountain Pass or there's the Underdark, but like definitely don't go to the Mountain Pass. That would be so challenging, and like Underdark should be way easier. Underdark, you're getting like clapped like everywhere. Like everything's just like super difficult, high level. I had to Google so many like things. I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing right now. And then This is something I like about the game, though. I would Google and like spoil, I guess, like certain things, like those turrets
Right.
at the tower, and then you see the answer. You're like, oh, like of course, like why didn't I think of that? But
yeah, the game
it
definitely
really
pushes
rewards
you
thinking.
to be a little creative or thoughtful. There's not necessarily puzzles in the game, but there are like traps or things to overcome, basically.
Yeah, I really want to spoil the tower. All I'll say is that there's not a quest in the tower, but there is really interesting environmental storytelling that requires you to like look at what's going on in the tower. Right. And if you look at enough things, you'll have a pretty cool encounter.
Nice. Yeah, I don't think I have a high like perception character, but I have I don't know, a certain spell that lets me like maximize a stat for a day or something, and I always usually cast it on perception on someone, so they can run around and like see everything.
It's oh sorry, I won't say anymore. Let me know when you get past it, because
I have a cool pretty
place.
balanced party. I have someone who's like great at Arcana, someone who's great at religion, someone who's great at history, because there's all these like sub things that aren't like combat based but are like story, environment, world kind of stuff. I don't think I have anyone good at survival, because that doesn't seem terribly interesting. But
it's finding random chests with like one gold.
Occasionally I'll be like, I'll find something, but often it's like survival failed on everyone, But I have some proficiencies in like history and Arcana and stuff like that.
It's a very thought provoking area.
Nice.
I'll leave it at that. But.
Yeah, I don't want to jump too far ahead. I've already accidentally spoiled some stuff with myself about Raphael, about the Mind Flayer Emperor, and this and that, which I wish I hadn't.
I've accidentally spoiled massive.
So at this point, I've actually I stopped going to the subreddit. I stopped watching anything on YouTube, because I'm like, I'm spoiling too much stuff about this game for myself, and I do hate spoilers. So it was never intentional. But of course, there's still so much undiscovered stuff about the game. It'll be a good time. But unfortunately, I'm like, aha. Although one thing to me is obvious, I'm like, aha, that is straight out of Divinity 2, which is basically Raphael, kind of. I don't know. Did you ever play Divinity 2?
I did. Okay. Well, an hour.
Right. Okay.
Not enough.
So there's a clear inspiration there with one of their companions, but of course in this game Raphael's more with you or the party. Basically a deal with the devil, but it was actually one of the best parts of Divinity 2 was this whole quest line with a bard companion character. Oh my god, what's her name? She's my favorite. I forget now, but she had just this like her story was like the entire game, and it was everyone like lauds it as the best story of the game basically, and like being a really cool payoff. Anyway, I can tell there's like inklings of that going there with that character, but I'm sure it'll go in some unexpected ways as well. And again, his voice actor is like, damn, I want more of this guy's voice is smooth.
Yeah, I wish I didn't spoil. It was like 2 days ago, and the title was like, I won't say.
Yeah,
it was like tagged Act 3 spoilers, and then it was like, is anyone like, and then like blah blah blah, like, or was anyone else surprised about this big plot reveal?
Yeah.
And of course, I'm just like click, and then it's like,
that's happened to me. I'm like, how bad can it be? I'm like, oh no, it's all spoiled in the first like 2 words or whatever, one sentence. I'm like, don't. Yeah. So that's why I'm like, okay, take a step back. But yeah.
Well, we could do like I don't know how many months it'll take us to fully finish, but it'd be interesting doing like not a review, but just like in a few months, just like a retrospective.
No,
like
it should be like Act 2. Other than I know there's like some cursed lands, and it's a lot about the goddess of Shar and the other one, the different gods of light and dark, and it's very Shadowheart focused and this and that, and you can alter her one way or the other or something, and this and that, yada yada. And I assume Act maybe 2 or 3 will have a lot more to do with Lae'zel, probably act more towards Act 3, I'm assuming, but I don't actually know. But yeah, it's cool. All I know is everyone says take Shadowheart with you everywhere in Act 2. I'm like, well, I'll do that anyway because I'm not giving up my cleric. I mean, bless. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I'm also semi-romancing her, so
Yeah, I think she and I have pledged to be.
I mean, everyone is. She's the most romance character by stat. But I also think that's because everyone keeps her in their party because she is like the first one you meet unless you pre-con her, and she's a cleric, which is the least played class in the game by creation. So
do bards have heals? I have no idea. I've never
can pick one. Yeah. I forget which one it is. I think it's the ranged healing word maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm like just trying to plan out my second playthrough. I think I want to be like a bard or something.
The bards are really interesting. I didn't stay a bard. I switched back to sorcerer once I hit level 5 because then I had tier 3 spells and it was like chain lightning, woohoo, let's go. But my brief stint as a bard was like, damn, this is really cool. I'm really flexible out in the world. You get options like practically every interaction, and you get like extra proficiencies for actually everything. I think they get a +1 passive to all their checks. But in combat, you can go like College of Swords or School of something. So you can actually become like a real combat bard or a more like supporty one, and just like pull out your loot and like strum buffs and stuff. And they have like hilarious insults with oh my god, what's it called? I forget what it is. There's a spell where you like debuff someone and you shout like insults and language at them, and it makes them disadvantage on their next roll.
Something mockery.
Vicious mockery. That's it. That's so bards are definitely. I mean, they're jack of all trades, like master of none, but they do let you experience a lot of different facets of the game in like fairly strong ways, from what I've seen.
Yeah, I'm like a very vanilla like sword and bow and arrow, and it's like my companions do that fine.
Yeah,
I don't need to be that for my character,
right?
So yeah, it'll be interesting for my second playthrough.
I'm probably going to go for a paladin because I had started one multiplayer and was like, these guys are pretty damn fun, and Smite is amazing. Like, oh my god.
Apparently, like Oathbreaker Paladin with like Smite is like the highest DPS in the game or something.
I did break my oath kind of early, although Kyle broke it for me even earlier. Damn it, Kyle.
Of course.
With the Lae'zel thing when she's in the cage, and I had agreed to like talk to them, and he came along and just like, Yahoo, sneak attack, and just started attacking them. And because the Vengeance Paladin is actually really hard to break, but one of the ways it breaks is if you like promise to like settle something and then you break that, then that happens. Because you can just kill civilians outright and you're fine, nothing happens as a Vengeance Paladin. Whereas the other paladins, like that breaks your oath, for example. You can even torture people. Like you can do a ton of stuff as Vengeance Paladin.
Have you gotten into like multi-classing at all, or not so much?
Not really. I think I mucked around with it by like I saved my game and then tried. I'm like, I feel like that's a better off a higher level thing. Like,
yeah, like I saw it was there, and it's just like this game is deep enough. I don't need to like become like a half ranger druidic.
Yeah, I
bard.
played around a lot with that in the Divinity games once I got good at it. Like, I have like 200 hours alone in Divinity 1, for example. But I feel like from what I can tell in this game, multi-classing is better off usually after level 5 or 6. Because you get really like character class specific stuff around then that isn't really worth giving up because you delay it, you know? So it's not your character level, it's your class level that matters in the game. You know, the level cap's 12, so you could be a level 6 barbarian and a level 6 paladin, or a bunch of other stuff. A level 3 bard and level 3 sorcerer and a level 6 paladin, you know, but your cap is 12, however you want to mix and match all that together. Right. And for my first playthrough, I'm just going straight. You know, maybe next time I'll muck around with some multi-classing, but not really into it. I don't feel the necessity because everyone feels cool and strong, like as is. You know.
Yep. Well, yeah, maybe like a month, 2 months, 3 months. How long it takes us? We'll do like a spoiler cast. Maybe should. Casper or somebody else will.
They could hop in.
Want to join?
I agree. We should do that. Yeah, like an Act 2, 3 sort of. And Larian's also been patching more stuff, and Act 3's been like polished and tuned up, and new endings were added for like Karlach and some other people, and so like more stuff has been added to the game too as well. So yeah, it can't hurt.
The one thing I'll say with Act 3, it's not really a spoiler. It's just jarring from like a gameplay perspective. Is Acts 1 and 2, you can do everything. I don't mean do everything as in like quests. I mean like every chest, every nook and cranny.
Yeah.
And I guess theoretically you could do that in Act 3, but like I don't think it's a spoiler really. You're in the city.
Yeah.
There's just like so much like busyness around you at all times that I find it jarring, sort of like it's not a tone shift, just like the scope of like the area that you're in is just like so much, not like physically larger in terms of like the map is like geographically larger, but more complex, I would say.
Interesting.
So if you're playing Act 1 and 2, where it's like, oh, like I'm gonna explore everything and open every chest and pick every plant, and like you can do that in Act 3, but get ready for some overwhelming experiences trying to keep up with that.
Okay. Nice. Well, I think we'll wrap it up here. So thank you very much, Sam, for the review, taking the time. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And yeah, we'll see you next time for any Mac news or maybe another retrospective on Baldur's Gate 3. So thanks a lot.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Take care.